Hello and welcome to my final presentation for my Trauma and Coping course at George Fox University. My name is Aubrey Cyphers, and let's get to it. So, I want to introduce to you the case of Nicole. Nicole, and this is how I pictured her. She looks really intimidating to me, but she looks good. Nicole is a successful attorney who is 41 years old. Right now, she's struggling in her marriage. She has a history of childhood emotional abuse. She's also a mom to two kids. One is in college and the other one is in high school. And yeah, she's going to be my client. And I'm me. I'm Aubrey. I'm almost 29. And I'm like, wow. So the two theories that I would use that would influence my work with her would be attachment theory and the polyvagal theory. So attachment theory is this theory that explains how we form relationships, because the relationships formed in our early childhood years affect all of our future relationships that we're going to have. It explains our ability to connect, create bonds, and ultimately it kind of decides how we regulate our emotions. The other theory I would use would be the polyvagal theory. This theory it's very interesting because it explains how our bodies can shut down in response to trauma. This theory focuses on the vagus nerve and the nervous system and its ability to switch our feelings. So, like a state of feeling calm and connected to switching to states of feeling or states of hypoarousal, going numb. So, with that said, how would I show up for Nicole, our very intimidating looking attorney here? Of course, I would be regulated and present. I would be welcoming, but I would need to be firm and stand my ground because I know she will. I'm not going to judge her, even though I may not agree with everything she has to say or the behaviors that she's going to engage in. And I'm not going to act like I know it all, because if I do that, she's just going to see me as controlling and she's not going to want to engage with me. But ultimately, like, my goal is I want to help her and all of the parts of her, and I want to help strengthen her window of tolerance. And maybe in return, she can help me a little bit too. So, let's talk more about trauma and what is trauma. So trauma is an emotional response that we have to an experience, and oftentimes this experience is chronic or reoccurrent, and it may occur during our developmental years. That's called complex trauma, but it leaves us with this inability to cope. Now for Nicole, trauma is the reason why she has rage with her husband. Trauma is the reason why she's an overachiever at work. Trauma doesn't define her, but it explains who she is. So that takes us to component-based therapy. And there are these 4 components within this theory. The 4 components are relationship, regulation, parts, and narrative. So the relationship means that we're going to work within a relational frame. Trauma occurs in relationships, so therefore the healing must occur in the relationship. There's regulation to increase the capacity or the window of tolerance. There's parts, and that's where we work with the dissociative parts of a person. And then there's the narrative, which it brings it all together. A narrative is about identity development and making meaning of trauma in the past. So if we look at this picture, you can see a gray outer circle that represents culture and context. And you can see it's pointing to another circle, which is the therapist. So the client is a bigger circle because that's the focus. The client should be the focus. But culture and context is going to affect all of these parts that are within the circle. So the relationship, the regulation, our parts, and of course, our story. And it's a relationship. So my 4 components are also going to affect my clients and their recovery. So let's talk about each of the components. We're going to start with relationship. So the therapeutic relationship, like I said, it's the foundation because trauma happens within relationships. Healing is going to occur in relationships, and that's what's working on the capacity of attachment. So in what ways is it going to work for Nicole and I? In what ways is it not going to work? Well, Nicole and I both have insecure attachment styles. So I think we can relate to each other on some level with our past, but she also has these other influences and her opinions. She believes that being a good person means that people are going to take advantage of her. But I know that people taking advantage is because of a lack of boundary. And that's what causes that problem. I also think like Nicole has a lot of parts. And it's going to be hard to be empathetic and accepting of all of those parts. And of course, I'm not going to agree with all of her risky behavior. And, like she engages in one night stands to fill the void of her emptiness. And I don't agree with that, but we will talk about that when we get further on in this presentation. So here are the 4 relationship measures. We've got open, expressive, connected, and assertive. Nicole is the lightning bolt. She is quick to connect, so I put her in as open. She spends the first couple of sessions like blabbing about things, and she's kind of in a dissociative state when she does that. But she feels empty and numb inside. So she's not connected. She pushes people away. And I put her as an aggressive and self-focused person because she's a high achiever, but she's also a person, or not a person, she's also a people pleaser. So I also put her under compliant. Now, on the other hand, there's me. I'm the heart, and you can see we're kind of on opposite sides. I tend to have difficulty opening up to people. However, I consider myself expressive because I'm responsive to people's emotions. I'm able to advocate for my needs. As far as connection, I tend to isolate myself, especially when I feel dysregulated or threatened by feelings or anything. And yeah, I'm also a people pleaser as well, but I have my limits and I've learned a lot with boundaries. All right, we're moving on to the next component, which is regulation. Regulation is someone's ability to manage their internal state to be functional. and connected in the present moment. So trauma survivors struggle with this because they're in their early development years, they weren't necessarily provided with an environment that was regulated or soothing, or they didn't have opportunities for good co-regulation. Um, and then, like, the opposite of regulation is dysregulation. Um, and this occurs when we are pushed away from our window of tolerance. So it can be hyperarousal, where our nervous system is overreacted or overactivated, sorry, or it could be hypoarousal, where we are shutting down. So, in hyperarousal, it looks like panic, rage, being stuck in a fight or flight state. And then hypoarousal is like being frozen almost. And it's linked to dissociation. And that's like when the mind is disconnected from the body. So other other ways that dysregulation manifests is within mood swings, anxiety, being chronically sad or disconnected, um, engaging in impulsive behaviors. So for Nicole, this is going out and sleeping with a lot of people and using that as a regulation tool, which is not very healthy. So co-regulation is very important within this model. And in a relationship with Nicole, and I'm saying relationship, therapeutic relationship, um, we're not going to be angry with her. We're not going to check out. We're going to make sure we're present. We're going to maintain our own body sensations because that's going to co-regulate hers. We're going to keep our nervous system grounded. And then if the vibes are off, we're going to name the emotions or the energy between us. And that'll keep us regulated. So regarding the 4 regulation measures, I put Nicole as hyper aroused because that's she's hyper competent in her career, but she also is like numb and dissociated, so she could be hypo aroused. She creates conflict to push away her husband, and she often feels anxiety within her body, and then she's ashamed of this bad side that she has. Yeah, so holds body in her trauma. She sees intimacy as a threat, and that's why she pushes away her husband. And she likes to create conflict. So the people that she's having conflict, they just go away. Yeah. Let's see. What else can I say? Yeah, she's impulse, fixed fights. Okay. Regarding me, I am also an overachiever. I am flexible, but I like predictability. I tend to internalize things. And I learned that as a coping mechanism because I witnessed my younger years, someone always putting the blame and hurt on other people. And I feel like that's not okay. And so I tend to hold all the hurt within me so I don't hurt anyone else. Doesn't always work. I'm fairly accepting of thoughts and I'm very aware of my body sensations, I actually use running and exercise as my outlet, and that's my main regulation tool. I don't know what Nicole's tool of regulation is, but I mean, there are lots of tools. She could listen to music or she can engage in yoga or I mean the breathing and the grounding works is very life changing as well. Um see. So co-regulation for her is difficult because her parents ignored her internal states or they even attacked her for having any emotions at all. And so she feels these as external threats. Um, and that's why I put that for externalizing. And yeah, that explains why she pushes people away. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to talk about dissociation. So, dissociation is a survival mechanism that allows trauma survivors to disconnect from their emotions, their thoughts, or even their sense of identity. And within this, people have these parts to themselves. We call it the dissociative parts. And these are all the aspects that make that person them, but these parts are disconnected from the person's awareness. Um, they're like fragmented self states, is what our textbook calls it. So the therapeutic process involves interactions between all of these parts and the therapist. And the therapist must be aware of their own identity, and that helps influence the treatment of the client. So Nicole has like two parts. She's got a good side, she's got a bad side. There's a lot of shame in Nicole's bad side. This is like, but the bad side is fueling this desire that she has to feel thrill, and it describes her impulsivity, and kind of like her desperateness to fill the empty void. And then is the good side helps avoid abuse, and all of the mistreatment that she's experienced, and it kind of helps maintain the stability within her life. Let's go. Let's talk about the measures now. So Nicole has a very fragmented identity. She's engaged, but she's disengaged emotionally, and she's unable to recognize her body's sensation. She feels like this buzzing within her body. Externally, she looks great, right? Successful attorney, but internally, yeah, she's not so great at relationships. Uh, yeah, she's a fragmented person. She's competent, but her trauma describes her as young little Nicole who's terrified and invisible, which makes her feel like she's a fraud. Um, she's disembodied. She doesn't recognize her body sensations. She feels tight all over and the buzzing. And yeah, she's externally resourced, but she's internally under-resourced, lacking intimacy in her relationships. She's doing other things. So regarding where I lie on these measures, I had to rebuild my identity after I experienced divorce, and I do not like conflict, so I sometimes am not fully engaged. Sometimes I check out, but I am present when someone needs me to be present, and I'm a problem solver. Which is so funny. I dislike conflict, but I like to solve problems, and maybe that has something to do with my past because there was always conflict around, and I feel most comfortable when there's not conflict. So I like to solve the problems. Um, I'm aware when my body is regulated or if I'm in survival mode, and I see myself as more resourced than Nicole, but it's hard for me to develop deep connections as well, and that's something that Nicole and I have in common. We're going to move on to our last component, which is narrative. So, narrative work in component based psychotherapy aims to help the client understand how their difficulties, trauma came from. Um, and yeah, these survival based responses that they developed need to be organized, and these experiences need to have meaning. And that's going to help them move beyond their past, beyond their trauma, instead of just surviving the trauma. But in order for this narrative part to work, the person needs to be regulated. They need to be present, which means they're not dissociated. That means they are aware of all of their parts, fragmented or not, um, because you can't look back on your history and make meaning of it if you're still in that state of trauma, the state of survival. So for Nicole, she can begin to identify her feelings of abandonment, and the goal for her would be to reach out to people instead of pushing them away. And I remember reading in the textbook um, that she made progress within therapy because one day she had a hard day at work. She came home and she felt like her husband was ignoring her. Maybe he was on the computer playing video games. And instead of internalizing it and be like, oh, he doesn't care about me, he's not interested, she went up to him and said, I had a hard day at work and I really want someone to talk about it with. And her husband listened to that and heard her, and that is progress. Um, so yeah, the goal here is that, I mean, where we're building identity and um, repairing relationships, and we're learning to accept, and hopefully she can appreciate all the parts of herself. So regarding the measures, um, let's go. We've got acceptance of memory. So she is on both sides because she, at first, like, she dismisses the facts about her past. She's like, "Oh, everything's fine. Like, yeah, my father cut me out and, I'm not really a part of the family anymore, but everything's fine." Um, but then, like, she also has this emptiness, to her. When it comes to mindful sharing, she can go either way. She's either a flood of information, or she doesn't wanna share anything at all. Um, her high competent identity and her career is like her armor. So this, like, disavows her trauma, and then she still has a split narrative. Um, she's still working on that. So did I cover everything? So, actually, I want to talk about, before I talk about mine, disavow, because I needed to do some research on that. Disavow is who I am is made to exclude or deny the reality of my trauma, my past. Basically, it means that, like, if you're closer on the spectrum to disavow, then you're afraid of yourself. You're afraid of the trauma part of yourself. Um, yeah. Let's talk about where I stand. So as far as acceptance of memories and my past, I tend to avoid that. I actually don't really like people knowing about that part of me, um, because it hurts to talk about that. Um, so I also put myself as secretive. I have made improvements though with denying, um, and so that's actually why I'm not closer to the disavow. I am very aware of things, and I have rebuilt my identity, and a lot of that came after divorce. Um, but of course, like Nicole, like she has a split narrative. Um, my life story is also very unbalanced as well. We're working on that. Oh, that brings us to our conclusion. Um, how would I grow from working with Nicole, uh, who I'm still intimidated by the way? Um, I think counseling Nicole would really push me to develop a capacity for secure relationships and make me self reflect on how I connect with people. Um, yeah, especially like the closest people to me. I think that I would develop a new type of empathy. Um, yeah, I want to make sure that I don't check out because I don't want her to avoid me and I don't want to avoid her. I don't want to fear her. I don't want her to fear me. But I think, yeah, developing a new empathy for someone who engages in things that I disagree with, maybe. Um, she also, because she's so fragmented in her identity, I think she would empower me to recognize all of my parts and all of my fragmented self states that I have. What have I learned about myself over this course? Well, four main things. Um, One, that I function the way I do because of my unpredictable childhood and my fear of feeling abandoned by my family. Um, I know that now. Number two, that I actually have many parts that make me me. I'm a daughter. I'm a teacher. I'm sometimes I feel alone um, a lot. I live alone. I'm in a long distance relationship. That's hard. But I'm also a world traveler. Um, and I don't know what my future is still. I'm gonna be 29, but boy, do I love living life. Uh, Number three, I used to be a very dysregulated person, and learning how dysregulation manifests and what that is really made me come to the realization in my marriage. now I'm divorced. In my marriage, I would have like fits of rage. And I always thought it was related to my biological father and all of the rage that I grew up with. Like he was constantly yelling, there was always conflict, and I always felt like it was me. Um, and I have this fear that I will go back to that rage. And so there's some comfort in being in a long distance relationship because I don't know, sometimes I really do wonder, like, am I regulated because I'm alone? Or am I like, is that monster gonna come back out, my dysregulated monster, um, if I'm living with another person? I don't know. It's for me to discover. And then lastly, my past has never defined me. I know that now. Um, I think I'll be healing for the rest of my life. And again, I don't know my future. Um, I'm still looking for my life story. I don't quite know my purpose still, but I'm really, really happy that I'm here. I'm really happy that I got to be a part of this course, this program, and I am so excited for the future. And that brings us to our end. Here are my references. Thank you so much for watching this. Thank you so much for um, being a part of my journey, getting my bachelor's degree. Um, I'm very excited and looking forward to seeing you in person and at graduation. And yeah,